My parents raised me, sacrificed for me, and drove 4 hours to watch me get married. So why were they being asked to move so someone else's cousin could sit down? My mother-in-law smiled at me like I should say thank you. My husband shrugged like it wasn't worth discussing. I stood in my wedding dress, flowers in my hands, and felt completely invisible, but not for long. My name is Samantha Brooks. I'm 34 years old, and I plan events for a living. Weddings, corporate galas, birthday parties, milestone celebrations. I've organized seating charts for hundreds of guests. I've managed vendors during meltdowns and kept timelines running during rainstorms. I know how events are supposed to work, which makes what happened at my own wedding even harder to explain. I grew up in a small house with two parents who worked constantly. My dad drove a delivery truck for 22 years. My mom cleaned offices on weekends when her regular job wasn't enough. They were never rich, but they were always there. Every school play, every graduation, every hard moment. They showed up every single time. I was never the girl who walked into a room and turned heads. I wasn't loud or flashy. I kept to myself, worked hard, and believed that quiet dedication was enough. For most of my life, it was. I built my career slowly, earned every client, and became someone people trusted with their most important days. Then I met Daniel. Daniel came from a different world. His family had money, properties, connections. His mother, Patricia, had opinions about everything and softened none of them. His father was quieter but followed her lead completely. They were the kind of family that assumed they were always right, and that assumption had never really been challenged. I noticed early on that Daniel struggled to push back on them, not in a dramatic way, more like he'd go quiet when they spoke over him. He'd change the subject when things got uncomfortable. I told myself it was just his personality, that he was a peacekeeper. I told myself a lot of things back then. We got engaged after 3 years together. I was happy, genuinely happy. My dream for the wedding was simple. Both families in the same room, both families treated equally. A day that felt like a beginning, not a competition. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. I had skills, patience, and a level of quiet determination that people like Patricia always underestimated. I just didn't know yet how much I'd need all of it. Before I go any further, I want to pause for just a second and speak directly to you. If you've ever sat at a family dinner and felt like a guest in your own life, you'll understand where this story goes. If you've ever smiled through something that hurt because you didn't want to cause a scene, you already know the feeling I'm about to describe. We do it all the time. We go quiet. We convince ourselves it's not worth fighting over. We say things like, "It's fine, let it go, don't ruin the day." And sometimes that's wisdom. But sometimes staying quiet is just a slower way of disappearing. Have you ever stayed quiet just to avoid conflict, even when it hurt? I did. For a long time, I did. And looking back, every time I swallowed something that bothered me, it didn't make things better. It just gave other people more confidence to push further. This story is for everyone who has ever felt invisible in a moment that was supposed to be theirs. If you're new here, welcome. This channel is a space for real stories. Stories about family, about dignity, about the moments that change you. If that sounds like something you need right now, please subscribe. There are more stories coming, and some of them will feel like they were written just for you. And if you've ever had family or in-laws or anyone overstep boundaries at a moment that should have been yours, drop a comment below. I want to hear from you. You are not alone in this. If this story resonates with you as it goes on, hit the hype button. It helps this community grow, and it tells me these stories matter to you. Now, back to the day everything changed. The morning of the wedding was supposed to be calm. I had planned it that way on purpose. I had a schedule printed out, vendors confirmed, and a timeline I had reviewed 4 times. I am an event planner. I know what organized looks like. But when I arrived at the venue that morning, something already felt off. The florist looked confused when she saw me. "Your mother-in-law already came by," she said. "She made some changes to the centerpiece arrangement at the front." Small thing, I told myself. Not worth a fight on my wedding day. I noted it and moved on. Then I walked inside and saw the seating chart. It had been reprinted, not adjusted slightly. Reprinted. My parents, who were supposed to be in the first row on my side, had been moved. They were now placed several rows back, near the middle of the room. In the front row on my side sat Daniel's aunt, two of his cousins I had met maybe 3 times, and a family friend of Patricia's whose name I had never learned. I stood there staring at that chart for a long moment. Patricia appeared behind me like she had been waiting. "We thought this arrangement looked more appropriate," she said. Her voice was perfectly pleasant. That pleasant tone she always used when she was telling you something wasn't up for discussion. "Those are my parents," I said. "They should be in the front." "Of course," she said, already walking away. "They'll be very comfortable where they are." I found my mom near the entrance. She was holding her small clutch purse with both hands and looking around the room with an expression I recognized. It was the expression she got when she was trying not to say something that would upset me. "Why are we back here?" she asked quietly. I didn't have a good answer. I said it was a mix-up. I smiled and told her I'd fix it. Then I found Daniel. He was near the groom's suite with 2 of his friends, relaxed and laughing. I pulled him aside and told him what had happened. I explained it clearly. The chart had been changed without my permission. My parents had been moved. His mother had already spoken to my florist. He listened. Then he said, "It's just seating, Samantha. Don't make it a big deal." Something shifted inside me in that moment. Not loudly. Just a quiet shift, like something settling into place that could not be undone. I walked back into the main hall. Guests were starting to arrive. I watched a man I didn't recognize lean toward my father and ask him if he was a friend of the family. My father, always gracious, smiled and said he was the bride's dad. The man looked genuinely surprised. A few minutes later, one of Patricia's relatives asked my father to slide over so their group could sit together. My father did it. He smiled and moved without complaint. I was standing 10 feet away when it happened. I watched my dad move quietly to the side. I watched my mom touch his arm. I watched them both pretend it was fine. Then my mom looked up and caught my eyes across the room. She smiled at me, that kind of smile that is meant to say, "Don't worry, I'm okay," but her eyes said something else. Her eyes were hurting. That was the moment I stopped trying to keep the peace. The ceremony itself was beautiful in spite of everything. I won't take that away from it. The vows were real. The flowers were exactly what I had chosen, even with the last-minute adjustments. And when Daniel looked at me at the altar, I believed him. That part was true. But the cracks kept showing. During pre-ceremony photos, the photographer moved through the family groupings quickly. He photographed Daniel's family extensively. His parents, his siblings, his extended relatives. When it came to my side, the session felt rushed. Patricia stepped into a shot that was supposed to be just me and my parents. When I asked for one without her, she laughed lightly and said, "Oh, we already have enough photos, no need to overcrowd." My mother stepped back without a word. She just stepped back. I asked the photographer quietly to get a separate shot of just the 3 of us before the ceremony started. He said he'd try. He never did. By the time we had a free moment, it was time to walk. At the reception, I discovered that the speech schedule had been changed. My father had prepared a speech. He had practiced it. I knew because he had called me 2 weeks earlier, nervous and sweet, asking if 3 minutes was too long. I told him it was perfect. His name was no longer on the list. In its place were 3 of Daniel's relatives, a family friend of Patricia's who I had never actually had a full conversation with, and Daniel's older brother, who had already told me privately that public speaking made him uncomfortable. I found the event coordinator, a young woman hired by the venue, and asked her what had happened. She looked apologetic. "Mrs. Patricia gave us an updated list this morning," she said. "I thought it had been approved." I found Daniel again. I told him calmly, very calmly, what had happened to my father's speech. "Look," he said, "it's easier to just let them handle the reception stuff. You know how my mom gets. It's one day, just let it go." One day. The thing about people who say, "It's just one day," is that they've never been the person made to feel small on that day. I walked to the back of the reception hall. I needed a moment alone. The room smelled faintly of the gardenias I had chosen for the centerpieces, and the sound of soft music and clinking glasses filled the space. But underneath all that warmth, something cold was settling over me. Then I heard two voices nearby. They didn't see me standing just around the corner of the doorway. "Her family didn't really contribute that much to all of this, right?" one of them said. "That's probably why they're not front and center," the other replied, laughing softly. I didn't move. I stood there and let those words hit me completely. My parents had given me money I didn't ask for to help pay for the dress. My dad had quietly transferred funds into my account 3 months earlier because he said he wanted to contribute. My mom had driven down twice to help me with favor packaging and table arrangements. They had given everything they had. And now people in this room were whispering that they hadn't contributed enough to deserve a front row seat at their own daughter's wedding. I felt something I had never quite felt before. Not sadness, not anger, something colder and much more focused. I stopped wanting to cry. I started thinking. Here is what Patricia didn't know. As the person who actually organized this wedding, I had kept certain things in my own hands. I didn't hand over full control at any point, even when I appeared to. The audio system had been set up through a vendor I personally contracted and had worked with before. The technician on site that day knew me, trusted me, and had my direct number. I had also created a backup speech schedule, printed, laminated, and kept in my small bag that traveled with me everywhere that day. My coordinator was a friend of mine from a past job, not the venue coordinator, my person. 3 months before the wedding, I had a quiet conversation with Emily, my best friend since we were 11 years old, about the possibility that Daniel's family might try to control something. Emily had met Patricia twice and said the same thing both times after leaving her presence. "Watch that woman." I had not fully listened then. I was listening now. I didn't plan any of this as revenge. That's not who I am. I planned it because I knew the territory I was entering. I had spent enough years watching families clash at other people's events. I had seen mothers-in-law redirect florists. I had seen speeches removed. I had seen families pushed to the edges of their own children's celebrations. I thought I was being careful. I was, but careful wasn't enough to prevent the hurt. It was only enough to prevent the permanent erasure. They thought they had control of the day. They didn't control everything. What I hadn't fully prepared for was how it would feel. Knowing something might happen and actually watching it happen to your own parents are two completely different experiences. But I had the tools, and I had made it far enough through the day without breaking. The reception was beginning. The speeches were about to start. I had maybe 20 minutes. Emily found me near the far side of the room. She had been watching everything. Emily was the kind of person who noticed details before they became problems, and she had been quietly furious for the last 2 hours. "Why are you letting them do this to your parents?" she asked. No build-up, just straight into it the way Emily always was. "I'm not anymore," I said. She looked at me for a second, reading my face, then nodded. "Okay, what do you need?" I told her. She moved fast and without drawing attention, the way she always had since we were kids navigating complicated situations together. She checked in with my audio technician. She confirmed the mic setup. She made sure my coordinator had the backup speech schedule ready. Meanwhile, in the main reception area, Patricia was in full performance mode. She greeted guests at the entrance as if she were the host. She guided people to tables. She laughed and accepted compliments about the wedding as if she had designed it herself. Daniel's family filled the room with ease and volume while my parents sat quietly at their table, eating bread and trying to look unbothered. I watched my dad pour water into my mom's glass. I watched her touch his hand. They were being kind to each other in the way people are when they're absorbing something painful together and don't want to make it worse by numbing it out loud. Daniel approached me near the edge of the room. He could tell something had changed in my expression. "Hey," he said, "are you okay?" "I will be," I said. He started to say something else. I turned and walked toward the stage. Emily appeared at my side for just a second as I passed the audio setup. "You're good," as the audio set up. "You're good," she said quietly. Patricia's brother-in-law was adjusting his cufflinks near the speech podium, preparing to go up first. The MC was about to introduce him. I reached the stage. I picked up the microphone. The room went quiet almost immediately. People notice when a bride takes the stage unexpectedly. Conversation dropped, glasses lowered, eyes turned. I stood there for one breath, just one. Then I started to speak. "I want to take a moment before the formal speeches begin," I said clearly. "Because there are some people in this room who I need to acknowledge. People who don't always ask for recognition, which is exactly why they deserve it publicly." I looked at the front row. Patricia was seated there, perfectly still, watching me with an unreadable expression. "When the seating was arranged for today," I said, "a decision was made to move my parents from the front to somewhere further back. Nobody asked me. Nobody asked them. They were just moved, quietly, the way you move something when you assume it doesn't belong at the center." The room was completely silent. My father drove delivery trucks for 22 years so I could go to college. My mother cleaned offices on weekends so we could afford the small extras that made life feel less hard. They did not attend this wedding as extended relatives or background guests. They are the reason I exist. They are the reason I became someone capable of building a life worth celebrating. My voice was steady. I hadn't expected it to be, but it was. They were placed in the back of this room today without my knowledge or consent, and I want everyone here to know that was not my choice. I heard a murmur move through the room. Not hostile, more like recognition, the slow shift of people realizing what they were watching. Patricia stood up slightly in her seat, her mouth beginning to form words. I continued before she could speak. "I also want to acknowledge that my father prepared a speech for today. He practiced it. He was proud of it. That speech was removed from the schedule this morning, also without my knowledge. He won't be giving it from the podium tonight." I paused. "But he will be sitting where he belongs." I looked across the room until I found my parents. My mom had her hand pressed over her mouth. My dad was completely still, watching me. "Mom, Dad, can you please come to the front?" There was a second of hesitation. Then my dad stood. He offered his hand to my mom. They walked forward through the quiet room, and I watched every single step they took. When they reached the front, I stepped off the stage and put my arms around both of them. My mom was crying. My dad held on. The applause started slowly. A few hands, then more, then the whole room. I heard it building behind me, like something that had been held back too long. I did not look at Patricia. I did not look at Daniel. I held my parents and I let the room do what it needed to do. After that, things settled in the way things do after a storm. Not perfectly, not cleanly, but the air was different. My parents were given seats at the front for the remainder of the evening. 2 guests voluntarily shifted to make room without being asked. My father ended up speaking after all informally, when one of Daniel's relatives generously offered him a moment during the open mic portion later in the night. He kept it to 2 minutes. It was perfect. Patricia and her husband left earlier than planned. There were no dramatic exits, no confrontations. They simply were no longer the center of the room. Daniel apologized to me that night. He said he hadn't realized how far things had gone. I believed that he believed that. But belief and trust are not the same thing, and we both understood that something between us had shifted. That is a longer story and a harder one, and it belongs to us alone. What I took from that day was not the applause. It was something quieter. I had spent years being the person who smoothed things over. The one who said it's fine, let it go, don't ruin the day. I had told myself that was maturity, but sometimes staying quiet is not maturity. Sometimes it is just fear dressed up in patience. That day, I didn't just say my vows. I found my voice. Have you ever been pushed aside in a moment that was supposed to be yours? A birthday, a graduation, a celebration, a decision that was completely about your life and somehow got taken over by someone else. If you have, I want to hear your story. Leave it in the comments. You might be surprised how many people read it and feel less alone because of you. Speaking up is hard. It costs something every time. But silence has a cost too, and it compounds quietly over years until you don't recognize yourself anymore. Subscribe if you're new here. More real stories are coming. Stories about families and boundaries and the moments that ask us to decide who we really are. Hit the hype button if this story reached you. It helps more people find this community. You are not the background of someone else's story. Sometimes the hardest moment becomes the one that defines you. Not because you planned it that way, but because something in you finally decided that being seen mattered, that your family mattered, that your voice mattered. If someone in your life is going through something like this, share this video with them. Not to make them angry, just to remind them that they are allowed to speak. And wherever you are, whatever moment you're walking into, remember this. Your voice matters more than their approval.